If you have your Bibles, by the way, open up to Psalm chapter 71. If you'd like to save your spot in Isaiah 39, we'll look at both of those. But Psalm 71 is where we're going to start. But I will say I've already decided I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time up here today. I'm like, some preachers, once they get up here and they start going, they start remembering all the things they wanted to write down, they forgot to write down. They're just like, I have you here, I'll preach forever. But I'm like, I'm not that way. I'm like a horse you pay money to ride, for 20 minutes. And once I see the barn, I'm ready to go back to the barn. We got the ice cream social. We got homemade ice cream here, folks. I'm just ready to get this thing going. So let's just, hear what I got to say and let's get out of here. How about that? All right. As a once famous pilot said, let's blow this thing and go home. So no Star Wars fans. All right. I was sitting in a midweek Bible study a couple years ago, and at the time we had just moved into this building, and the brick wall room was still filled to the brim with the stuff from our move, and so our meeting was right there we were sitting around the table in the lobby, just me and two couples, and we're reading through Philippians, and somehow we got talking on church stuff, church life, and stories about church and all that sort of thing. And one of the people chimed in, he goes, and it's funny, sometimes churches just die. And he told a story about when he was a young man, he took his family into a church, and he walked in the church, and everyone was the same age. And everyone was, and there were no kids there because there's no kids ministry because the kids were not there to minister to, and there's no youth group, and there's not enough youth to group together in a group. There's not enough young adults ministry because all the people that were served by those ministries had grown up and gone and moved away, and they'd not been replaced or whatever, and they saw this young family walk in, and they all just kind of lasered in on them, and they're like, this is a very nice church, but I probably won't be back next week. And he goes, and I don't know what happened. I don't know how to do that. Because sometimes churches just die. They get to the point where they just can't keep going. They age out. And I said on that day, I said, that's a storyline, that's a through line that a lot of churches live through. And a way that churches have historically battled that is by giving the younger generation the music. by giving them different things, their style things that we say, all right, well, let the younger generation kind of spearhead this. And the reason for that is not because a church is trying to go shallow or trying to compromise or anything like that. The reason is because that's something you can actually go back and forth on. Some things in church are set, right? Some things in church are already decided. Right? We don't get to go to the younger generation and be like, all right, guys, here you go. Here's our theology. Do whatever you want with it. Like, that's set already. All right, that's already been decided. We don't get to go, hey, here's our bylaws. Here's our beliefs on life, the universe, and everything. Cut it up however you think, just so we can make it appealing to you. Like, those things are already set in stone. We don't get to do anything with that. And so what they do is they find something like the worship, or they find something like, the way we do outreaches or different ministries we put on, and we say, hey, why don't you do this? And maybe that will allow us to pass this faith on to the next generation one step down. Because sometimes churches just die. And I can almost hear what you're saying. It's like, all right, Garrett, so you're not going to let the younger generations have the theology. So we're just going to all have this boomer theology. Is that what you're saying? We're all going to have to just believe whatever the boomers believe? No, dude. The boomers were hippies. All right, they're the ones that gave us free love. They had to be shaped by Christ just like the rest of us. We have to be. The goal of Christianity is for us to take the Word and let it shape us, not for us to shape the Word. So no, there's not one generation that was trapped in time, this magic, and they just happened to be the moral generation. No, everyone had to be shaped in the image of Christ. Everyone had to have it. And so, some things you can't just hand off to the next generation as they show up. And some things you can. Now, I want you to hear me when I say this. This is not a sermon about worship style. This is not a sermon about what songs we will sing. This is a sermon that is 1,000 times more important than the songs we choose to sing. And that is the fact that the church is intentionally multi-generational. The point was that there would be a wide swath of ages in the same room. The point was that people from different generations, often warring generations, could still find their way into the same worship center and sing the same songs and listen to the same sermons at the same time. The point was that the different generations would be able to interact with each other and follow Christ together and move in the same direction together and not go blowing up every time they interact with each other. And so the question is not, how do we get me to keep coming back to my church? Because I'm always going to be coming back to my church. You're always going to be coming back to your church. The question is, how do we pass the faith on from one generation to the next? Because, and this is just how life works, it's always the older generation's task to pour into the next generation. That doesn't go the other direction. And so the question is, if God was intentional about the church being multi-generational, shouldn't the church be intentional about being multi-generational? Shouldn't our efforts tell the world, these are the efforts we spend our time on, and the reason we spend our time on these efforts is because we are intentionally multi-generational? The way Christians have found a way to think through this is by talking about mission and method, all right? The mission is one of the things in church life that will just never change. The mission is not up to us. The mission was set by Jesus Christ. Reach the world for Jesus. That was what we talked about last week. Preach Christ. Connect people. The Great Commission. Tell the world about Jesus Christ. Reach them with the gospel. That's the mission. But the method is something different. The method is not preach Christ, connect. The method is, how do we go about accomplishing the mission? The mission is decided by Jesus. The mission is what we do, but the method is how we do it here. And we don't have to do it how everybody else does it out in the world. We don't have to be like every other church in the world. The question is, how do we do it here? How do we want to do it here? And in the 90s, I grew up in the church. In the 90s, there was this thing we affectionately called the worship wars. Did anybody live through the worship wars? Yeah, Steve, he's sad even thinking about it. I was a kid, so I was on the side that was excited about it. Steve took one on the chin probably every Thursday. Every Monday morning, got plenty of hate mail for the worship wars. The worship wars were questions like this. Are we going to put a drum set on the stage? Are we going to let rock and roll be played inside the walls of the church? Is that what we're going to do? And it wasn't just music. Does the preacher have to wear a suit, or are we allowed to wear jeans? Does the worship band have to wear matching pastel-colored shirts? Like, is that a thing? Like, what are we going to do here? And there were wars about it. And you know what? Those were serious questions. They deserved serious discussion. But hear me when I say this. Those were all discussions about method. None of it was about the mission. I guess the question was, can the mission be accomplished through different methods? But when we ask the question, are we going to do life groups or Sunday school, we're not necessarily talking about something that's Christian in its nature, because you could use the Sunday school model to teach math. You could use it to teach knitting. You could use it to teach any kind of, you could use life groups to teach anything. You just have a book club, right? These are things you could use to do other things. It's just the method we're choosing to do the mission. In Acts chapter 6, we see this moment where the mission comes to a crashing halt because people are realizing that some of the widows are not being taken care of appropriately. And so all the apostles gather around and they say, all right, here's what we're going to do. Church, you guys, I want you to choose 7 godly men, and then we're going to have them solve this problem. That's what they chose to do. They chose 7 godly men, and they solved the problem. Now here's the question. Does that story mean that every church has to have 7 godly men walking around the halls, feeding widows? And does that mean that's how everyone's supposed to solve that problem for the rest of history? No. That's just the method they chose there. The mission comes from God. Feed the widows, take care of them, make sure they're okay. The method was decided by people in the room. And the mission, and here's how we say it. The mission can never change. But the method is always allowed to change. We're not going to baptize our method just because that's how we do it here. We've always done it that way. We're not going to do that. because the method is always allowed to change. But the mission, that will always have to stay the same. I'll tell you how it happened here at Foothills. Last year, about this time, we had a group of people show up in the brick wall room. We had it clean after a year and a half of being here. We finally cleaned it out and said, let's have a meeting in there. And so we got people together. We said, ask this question. What are some ideas that we can do that no other church in town is doing? Like, what are some ideas we can pull off at our size, with our scope, with our abilities, that maybe is a little different than everybody else is doing? And we had a whole marker board filled with ideas, and I loved them. There are ideas like water bottles with our names on them that we can hand out at events, or we own a station at the bike race that goes around this area, or a barbecue competition. I'm still waiting for that one to happen, but I expect all these to happen very soon, actually. But they were great ideas. They were really good ideas. And stuff like that was getting put on the wall all night long, and one idea that eventually came out of that meeting was what we ended up calling the Foothills Firelight Mysteries. And Lisa told me about that idea, and I didn't quite understand what she was thinking, but I heard what she explained to me, and I said, you know what? This idea has the potential to one day be a thing that people in this area puts on their calendar as a tradition for their family. This has the potential to be one of those things where you'll hear around town, hey, have you scheduled the next date for the Firelight Mysteries yet? Hey, you're going to hear kids go, hey, I grew up going, our family did this every single year. Like, this is the kind of idea that we came up with at that moment, and we'd never done it before. And so I heard it, and I said, Lisa, I think that's a wonderful idea. Let's do it. And she started coming up with the idea. She started writing scripts, started recruiting volunteers, and people started getting their parts memorized, and none of us, other than Lisa, could quite wrap our minds around what she had in her head. But hay bales showed up out back, fire pits showed up, Brian ran over one of them. That's okay, we're not talking about it. Tiki torches were put up all over the place. We had a 20-foot tent out in front of our building for 2 weeks. Like, all these things were going on. And then the night showed up, and we had this window of time for people to come through the event. And it turned out everybody came at the very beginning, which is fine, because we didn't know how it was going to work. And we ended up having everybody go through. They got the clues. They solved the mystery. And they were hanging back there with 40 people, 5 or 6 different families we'd never met before, around fire pits, roasting hot dogs and marshmallows, listening to music, and just hanging out. And it was such a good event. And this year, we're going to be able to wrap our minds around it. This year, we're going to know how to help beforehand. This year, we're going to know how to pull it off even better. But it's because we tried a new method. And I know what you're thinking. Garrett, have you scheduled the next Firelight Mysteries yet? Yes, we have. Thank you for asking. It's November 9th. Put it on your calendar. November 9th, we're doing it again. Because the mission is there, and it's a method that I think will work for our community. The mission never changes, but the method is always allowed to change. And the mission is passing the gospel along. Here's how David felt attached to the mission. Psalm 71. We're going to start in verse 14. This is what he said. Now, David, we all know this about David. David felt a very sincere connection to God. He felt a very powerful love from God, and you're going to hear all about that in here. But he also felt a requirement to pass that love on to other people. Listen to how he says it here, verse 14. He says, "As for me, I will always have hope. I will praise you more and more. My mouth will tell of your righteous deeds, your saving acts all day long, though I know not how to relate them all. I will come and proclaim your mighty acts, sovereign Lord. I will proclaim your righteous deeds, yours alone. Since my youth, God, you have taught me, and to this day I declare your marvelous deeds." Now listen, what he's saying. He's saying, I have experienced all this from you. I have received this from you. So here's what I want to respond. Even when I'm old and gray, do not forsake me, my God, till I declare your power to the next generation. Your mighty acts to all who are to come. Your righteousness, God, reaches to the heavens. You have done great things. Who is like you? And this is what David feels from God. He feels that I have received nothing but blessing from God, and my heart desire is to pass it along. And listen to what he says. He says, even when I'm old, Even when my hair is gray and my youth is gone and my beauty fled the scene long ago. The youth group, when we did the event over the summer, the youth group, there's a 4-hour break in the middle, so we'd hang out at my house, and the youth group kids found my wedding picture, and they're like, oh, okay. My beauty has fled the scene long ago. I can't climb trees anymore, right? That's the stage of life I'm in. Even then, don't pull me out of the game yet. Even then, don't stop me short. Even then, I will declare your power to the next generation. I will tell everyone I can tell. We talked about this in a series last year we did called Praise, what it is and how to do it. And we looked at this one verse and we said, this idea of passing the faith on from one generation to the next, that's not just a me thing. That's not just a you thing. It's a whole church-wide thing. It's something the whole church participates in, as well as how we participate by ourselves. It says this, Psalm 145 says, one generation shall praise your works to another and shall declare your mighty acts, shall praise your works. That as we live church life and as we sing our worship songs and we sing our songs of praise, one of the things we do is we are handing off the faith from one generation to the next. I was thinking about this sermon last night, and I was just thinking about my childhood when my church was pouring into me, and I thought, man, if I were to hear that song, I will sing to and worship the Lord. If that just kind of popped up, I would start dancing. I would be singing so loud. That has such a close place in my heart because that's the song I grew up with. That's the song that older people wrote and led me in worship and passed the faith down to me through music and singing. And this is how it works. Jerry Harris says that every church has what's called the dot. The dot is the exact average age of our church. Take every age in the church, the newest baby to the most seasoned veteran of God's love, and you take all their ages, the oldest people in the room, you take all their ages, we add them up and divide them, do the whole thing, and we average it out. That's the dot. That's the average age of our church. And then if you take the 10-year period, 5 years younger than the dot, 5 years older than the dot, that decade, he calls it your sweet spot. That's the thing your church is most effective at reaching, that decade right there. Is everybody following the idea so far? We get it? Okay. Now here's the deal with the dot. If nothing changes, say the dot is 45, whatever it would be. If absolutely nothing changes, which doesn't happen in church life, but let's pretend, no one gets mad at Garrett, throws their hands and goes, I'm out of here, I'm leaving. No one gets a better job in Tulsa. No one graduates. No one dies. No one's born. Absolutely nothing happens. Do you know what happens to the dot this time next year? It clicks up 1. In the next year, it clicks up 1. In the sweet spot, clicks up 1. Because everyone in this age, older than 30, knows the same thing. Time just rolls on. And you're not stopping it, and I'm not stopping it. And the dot only moves up voluntarily. Now, the only way for the dot to start moving back down that sliding scale is if the people in the church start being intentional about being multi-generational. If we start saying, it is our job to pass the faith on to the next generation. It is on us to get connected to the next generation. It is on us to invite the next generation into the faith. Once we do that, that's when the dot starts going back downhill. But if we don't, then it just moves up. And I love the older people in our church. I have a brunch with them most months. Well, by the way, we talked about it. If we're going to do brunch munch on Thursday, if you're available, text me. And 55 and older or Garrett, that's the group. So it's a pretty exclusive group, all right? But here's the deal. The Christian goal is that even when I'm old, even when I'm gray, even when I'm feeling like I'm out, I will not stop declaring your power to the next generation. But there is another way to do this. There's another way to go about this idea of getting older and growing up and having what you have and having what you like. There's another king in the Bible named Hezekiah. Now, Hezekiah is an interesting character because King David is known as a man after God's own heart, but we are all well aware that he's also a very sinful man, failed in mighty ways, failed in very spectacular ways. But Hezekiah was also a good king, and I heard a preacher this week call him, he was the king who got everything right until the day he got everything wrong. He was knocking the ball out of the park his entire kingdom until one day he got prideful. And then Babylon sent an envoy in to check on them, see what's going on there. And Hezekiah wanted to brag to these people. He wanted to show them what kind of king he's been. And so he took them all throughout the palace. He took them everywhere they could go. He took them to see the courtroom and into the kitchen to see every piece of exotic spice or food they had in their cabinet. He took them into the treasure trove and saw every ounce of gold they had. And he showed them every little thing they had, everything to show them what kind of kingdom they are. And then they left. And the prophet Isaiah was coming back into town and saw the envoy leaving the palace. And he walked in there and he says this in Isaiah chapter 39. The prophet asks, "What did they see in your palace?" "They saw everything in my palace," Hezekiah said. "There's nothing among my treasures that I did not show them." And then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, "Hear the word of the Lord Almighty. The time will surely come when everything in your palace and all that your predecessors stored up until this day," the predecessors, all the generations that came before you, all they handed down to you, all that's going to be gone. It'll be taken away to Babylon. Nothing will be left, says the Lord. And some of your descendants, of your own flesh and blood, will be born to you. They will be taken away, and they will become eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. And the word of the Lord you have spoken is good, says Hezekiah. Good. Because there will be peace and security in my lifetime. Did you hear it? Did you hear how intensely self-centered he was? Sure, I ruined it for everyone coming behind me. Sure, I'm leaving nothing but a wreckage for all the generations following, but at least I'll be taken care of. At least I'll have a good and easy life. At least I'll have the things that I wanted. At least I also have the gold to work with. At least I also have the palace to live in. And this is what happens often when we think about our lives. We go, well, at least I had people coaching me at baseball, or at least I had people teaching my Sunday school class. At least I had the music I wanted. At least I had the things that helped me come to Christ. And God's going, no, we don't think that way. If you ever find yourself in the sweet spot of a church, first of all, good for you, it must be nice. And second of all, that sweet spot is just a decade of time where you get to be built up and discipled and learn that this job you are receiving as a Christian is to know how to pass the faith on to the next generation. Your time in the sweet spot is not a hot tub. It's not a time for you to just sit there and enjoy yourself. It's a time for you to go, all right, God, what do you have for me to learn? What do you have for me to do? What do you have for me to build myself up so that I could be deployed in your mission? And so I like David. I like all the people before me. I like the people who funded this, who don't even go to church here. They live out there in King. They funded the planning of this church. And they're going, we're going to be people who pass the faith on to the next generation. Pass the faith on to the next generation. And we're not going to be happy knowing, well, at least it was all there for me. No, we need to be the people who leave things better than they found them. That's one of the signs of maturity in this world. Do we leave what we received better than when we got it? And the important thing is the mission. And the methods always change. And we can't fall in love with certain methods to the point where we refuse to engage in the mission. A couple weeks ago, I went down to my home church, and they were doing. So Megan wasn't there, so I had all 4 kids, and I got them ready for church. It was great, and I drove them into town. My home church was doing something that's kind of popular right now. It's called At the Movies, and what they do at the Movies is you walk in, and there's all these counters filled with people dressed in like old-timey, movie theater costumes, and they're handing out popcorn and candy, and it's like a movie theater. You walk into a movie theater, and then they send you into the church service, and they sing worship like normal, they take communion like normal, and then you sit down, the lights go dark, and instead of a preacher coming up, they start playing. It's like you're in a movie theater, and they start playing parts of a movie, like this was Lord of the Rings this time, and they show you a portion of the movie, and then the preacher comes up on the screen, and he was dressed like kind of in costume, looked like he was in the Shire, and he gave spiritual connections and ideas about the story and how it kind of has the same idea of what the Bible teaches, that sort of thing. And I did not love it. I was not. I was not a fan of holding popcorn in one hand and communion in the other. Like, it was just kind of. I ate the popcorn and candy. I'm not a psycho, but it's not what I'm looking for when I show up at church. I'm a Bible guy. My favorite compliment that our church, the Restoration Movement's ever received, came from Scott McKnight. He led a Bible study as in one time, and he goes, "I'm not a restorationist." That's what the Christian church is, a restoration movement. He goes, "I'm not a restorationist, but I like the restoration movement. Your pulpits are big enough to hold Bibles." And I thought, you know what? What a great compliment. Thank you. I don't even need the rest of this Bible study, and I don't remember what he said. That was the only thing. But that's what I like. That's what I like. And although my mind thinks that way when it comes to story and movies and how God's message kind of intersects with that whole thing, that's not what I was looking for. And the movie was coming to an end, and the time was finishing up. I'm getting ready to corral my kids and get them out of there. And I look over, my daughter Sarah goes, "Dad, we should do something like this at our church." And I go, And in 1 minute, one moment, I went from going, "I am not a fan," to, maybe we should do something like this at our church. Because it's not about me. I'm not here to make me happy. I'm not here to get my style of music on stage. And just for the record, Bradley, have I ever mentioned Irish pub rock to you? No. See, I have not. Because no one would like it except for me, all right? Although you're all thinking, actually, it'd be kind of cool. It would be cool, okay? Whatever. I'm not here to get my style on stage. I'm here to be part of a church that passes the faith from one generation to the next. And I just got to tell you, we have some rock stars in the room. We have some people that if you would go take them for coffee, you would learn so much of life from. Miss Katie, she grew up on a farm in Florida, worked in the nursery her entire life, saw kids grow up and leave churches that she was a part of. Steve is one of the most available people I've ever met in my life. If you're not getting together with him, I don't know what you're waiting for. Although he doesn't have time now, but, only for me. But here's the deal. I am proud of the generational spread that we have at our church. I love it. And here's what's amazing. Once you get out of college and once you start entering in the old adult life, here's what you learn. There is really such a thing as friendships that take place over 30-year gaps and 40-year gaps. And you go, wow, this is my friend. He's 20 years older than me, but he's in part of my church. We're friends now. Yeah, welcome to adult life. It's great. We have some legends. We have some rock stars right here in our midst. But we're not going to rest there. We're not going to stop there. We're going to be a church that passes the faith on from one generation to the next. John Lithgow has been slated to play Dumbledore in the new series of Harry Potter that's coming out. And he's 79 years old. He says, by the time production's over, I'll be 87 years old. And he said this, "It was not an easy decision to accept this role because it will define the final chapter of my life. I'm not super concerned of how an actor's final chapter will be defined. I am concerned of what my final chapters will be defined as. And I am concerned as to what Foothills Christian Church will be defined as, and what God will say about our number when he looks at our church. And I hope and I pray that he will say, that is a church that even when it was old and gray, even when the people were even when they were 100 years old, they did not stop passing the faith on to the next generation. My brother just got a job. And he's going to be moving soon. He just got the task of being a pastor at a church that is 140 years old. These things are real. These things happen. And our church is 13 years old. But that can be there for us. Not for me to experience, not for you to experience, but it can be there. And right now, the ball's in our hand. And it's our turn to run. And we should be like David and say, God, don't pull me out early. Don't stop me short. I'm going to run, and I'm going to pass the faith on to the next generation till my dying breath. And I want you to join me because this is what God is calling us to. Father, thank you for this day.